Hi there, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you're joining us on our YouTube channel, guys, thanks for jumping on. If you're joining us on our podcast streams, thanks for listening. This is Josh Burtram. I am your faithful host, and I have with us Will Wright, our political host. It's good to see you, Will.
Well, you're only human, Josh, and I have that effect on people.
Exactly. And was that on your list?
It was on my list.
He has a list of responses, Aimee, just so
awesome.
you know, so that
He's really
we can.
thinking.
Yes, exactly. And so, but guys, we're very thankful to have on our program today Aimee Byrd. She is an author and speaker known for her work exploring theological topics, particularly concerning women's role within the church. She's authored several books, including Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, The Sexual Reformation, and the one we're going to talk to her about today, Saving Face. Her work often includes critical analysis of traditional interpretations of biblical texts and a call for deeper theological engagement. And as a former coffee cafe owner, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And uses her skills in her current work. And we are so excited, Aimee, to have you on the program with us today. Thanks for joining us.
So am I. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, quick question. So, sorry, I don't mean to hijack you at the top, Josh. But so was it current cafe owner or?
No, I did that in my early 20s.
Wow. So I'm really curious because I'm a bit of a coffee connoisseur.
Okay.
I roast my own beans.
Nice.
You know, Sweet Maria's is my friend. What's your favorite type of coffee?
My favorite drink?
Yeah.
Okay. I think my favorite coffee drink is an Americano, which is just espresso and hot water, like a double shot of espresso with some hot water in it. Every now and then I like to put some homemade whipping cream, whipped cream on top.
Yes.
I love that. So actually interesting, nothing to do with what we're going to talk about, but Americano, that came from World War II when Americans would come over. Yeah. And they couldn't handle the espresso. They would pour water in and they would call it an Americano. So that's kind of interesting. At least that's what I heard. So you can fact check me on that.
So much better than like another, brewed type of coffee, right? And if you want a whole cup, I mean, I do like just a plain cappuccino as well.
Who doesn't?
And then if I want to be kind of a little sweet, I think my favorite is to do like a mocha cayenne.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like cayenne pepper?
Yeah.
Wow.
Spicy chocolate. Yeah.
That's hardcore.
Well, we're going to have to do a completely different episode to talk about all this coffee stuff because that is fascinating. But I want to jump right in and get into your book and get into the good stuff that we're looking at. So I'd love to kind of just help you, or not help you, but ask you to introduce your book to our audience. And why did you write it? There's a little bit of a controversy and crisis out of which this was written.
Yes,
and I'd love for you to kind of give us the context.
Yeah. Okay. So Saving Face is my 8th book. And I began writing as like a young mom. I did not aspire to be a writer, but I came from a divorced home. My husband came from a divorced home. And I think when we got married, I really wanted to be purposeful about having a good marriage and a strong Christian marriage and raising our kids in the faith. And so I did a lot of reading to try to learn more because I just wasn't finding any outlet in the church really as a thinking woman. And I had a lot of theological vigor. Like I wanted to talk about God and learn more about him. And I had a lot of excitement for that. But I couldn't find where I fit in church and where I could have these conversations. And so I was in a complementarian church, which is where, I guess the nice way of describing it is benevolent male leadership. And so I think that had something to do at first. I thought was just, okay, well, when they see men with theological vigor, they want to invest in them because they could be potential leaders. And they don't really know what to do with women in that sense, and all the resources for us was like how to be a mom, and how to serve our husbands. And so I thought, well, maybe if I wrote a book, it could be like a tool for women to see how theology is just as important for us. What we believe about God affects our everyday lives. And maybe this would be a way to get women talking, And lo and behold, it did. The book came in, as something that women were interested in. I started getting asked to do speaking engagements. The next thing you know, I was asked to co-host this podcast with an academic in the Presbyterian world and a PCA Presbyterian pastor. And I was kind of the woman at the table and the layperson at the table. And we had a really good dynamic. The podcast got pretty popular, and I started writing more books. Each book was kind of another layer of the onion. As I addressed this, like, people are like, "Oh yeah, women should care about theology. This is great. We like this woman, And then I started getting into the women's resources, and they're not really good. Why aren't they? Oh yeah, that's a good point too, Aimee. Let's talk about that. And I get invited to talk about that all over the place. And I'm finding many, many other me's in these churches, women who are dying for this kind of conversation and growth and connection, but feeling like when they go to their leadership that they're like causing trouble or being like looked at like they have mold on their face or something, So I see that, okay, this is a real thing, and it's not just at my church, and it's not just me, I was all over the country and out in Canada and Puerto Rico and just going all over the place seeing this happening. And so I started writing more about like the dynamics between men and women in church, a book called Why Can't We Be Friends? And people started questioning me then. Aimee's making a case for siblingship in church. And, I think that she's saying that men and women should have candlelight dinners with other people's spouses, this kind of thing. Like, okay, what? And then I just started to really critique as I'm going into these different spaces, these different conferences. I start to say, you know what? I want to write a real critique of this whole movement called Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I'm seeing some huge Trinitarian theological error in it, and then that's applied to women's roles, which is strange. I'm seeing really just unbiblical teaching and cherry picking out of the Bible. I more like to look at the Bible as a biblical theological approach, like what's the whole Bible saying here, but how does it unfold as we're learning, instead of just picking out certain scriptures and taking them out of context and building a whole doctrine on it. So I thought, I'm going to write a book that addresses this, but I want it to be an invitation.
Well, you're in good company here, Aimee.
Okay.
We appreciate that as well.
Okay. So I wanted it to be not only a critique from the inside, but an invitation. So the book was called Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, in an answer to kind of the main book that came out from this movement over 30 years ago called Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And in it, I talked about, let's look at the way the male voice and the female voice is used in Scripture, and what can we learn from that? What's being told in that story? Let's look at what discipleship actually is and how it happens and where it's happening today. And let's go back to this great honor and privilege of brothers and sisters in the church, and what should that dynamic look like? And I expected some pushback, definitely. I expected a lot of critique, and I'm quoting from this book and from other people that a lot of people like. So I'm trying to do it in a respectful way, but I know that when you name names, people don't like that either. So a large group of leaders started harassing me and calling me names and calling ahead of my speaking engagements, saying, beware of this woman coming to speak, guard your families and your churches. So they're causing all this disruption where I'm about to speak everywhere. They start punishing the people that host me by harassing them and going after their pastors online. They had a whole Facebook group. It was like over 1,100 people in this group. And it was led by leaders in my own denomination. And it was full of leaders in adjacent denominations and even academics. And the name calling was terrible. Like, I'm the great whore of Babylon, and I'm Jezebel. And, why doesn't she just shut up and make me a sandwich, And they're sharing misogynistic quotes by the church fathers and saying, why can't we go back to this? And They're picking apart my looks in my videos, saying like, she looks butch, and her femininity is being withdrawn here in this video. Just crazy. And then they're plotting to destroy my Amazon page with, sabotage it with bad reviews without having to buy more than one copy of the book. And they're trying to plot ways to press charges against me in my church and my leaders in my church. And you guys, the worst part about it was that I found out one of my own elders was in this group. One of my elders from my church, who I thought I was friends with.
Oh, that's horrible.
Whom I'm good friends with his wife, who is actually the assigned elder to my family to shepherd us. And he wasn't commenting as far as saying mean things about me, but these threads would have over 100 comments in them, and they were from morning to night. He would pop in and answer like a theological question or a question about church government, and then like let himself out the back door. You know what I mean? So clearly he's lurking, and yet doing nothing to defend me, doing nothing to inform me. I was driving to one of these retreats where they called ahead, and I don't know what kind of controversy I'm driving into. There's going to be all this supervision of me now because they need to see if I really am dangerous. And these men like joked around on this website that, maybe we will have a little meetup of our own at the same time at this retreat center. So I didn't even know, like, I might possibly run into some of these guys. And I don't know how harmful they are if they're willing to do all this, So it was devastating. And I went through a 2-year process.
So sorry.
Yeah. I went through a 2-year process of just trying to confront this in my denomination through proper church order. And that was horrible. Horrible. Every step of the way was more traumatic. I found myself at a presbytery meeting. It's like a regional meeting of leaders where I'm referred to as that lady. Jokes were made about me from the man up front, but I'm not allowed to speak. There's laughing, and totally my work is being misrepresented, this kind of stuff. So it was, I lost friends. I lost my job at the podcast. On that website, which was very conservative. I worked there for 7 years, and people who I thought were my friends, one of them posted this article. He was the editor, and he said, it was the week my book came out, and he said, there are some concerned people about this book and this writing, and we have some questions that we'd like you to answer. He posts this, like publishes this, 9 questions for Aimee Byrd to answer by these unnamed men. So I answered the first one, which was ridiculous, about natural law and the nature of men and women and authority and submission. And then I said, I asked around, got some advice. Should I continue to answer these questions? Because I feel like, okay, I can answer these questions, but have they ever done this to a man? Like, they could have interviewed me. They could have done something a lot better to address their concerns. Some of those questions had nothing to do with my writing. They were about marriage. Some of them just read the book and you'll get the answer, or you're misrepresenting what's written in the book, So I didn't answer them. Then the board pressured me to answer them, the unnamed board. I don't know who's on the board, And so when I didn't answer them, they said that they would be graceful upon my exit. Anyway, The whole process was very traumatic. I had no idea about trauma. I didn't know. I thought I was thick-skinned. I thought, this is ridiculous. I thought I could logically figure this stuff out and move on. But your body keeps the score, as the popular book is titled. So I've had to do a lot of work through that. And Saving Face is my second book in working through that. And or third, actually. But Saving Face is a lot different than my other writing. I think this is the book that I've been really wanting to write the whole time. And it took going through all this to get to it, to get back to myself. And my writing style is different in it. It's more contemplative. It's more creative. It's less doctrinal, even though it's, I think, deeply theological. And this book is, the elevator pitch is that it's a reflection on the divine face and the meaning that we get from the faces of others as we're trying to find our own. And so that is the long and the short of how I wrote the book. It's
That's
really a turning back to myself this time and saying, okay, well, I could say these are the bad guys. What they did is incredibly cruel, and they did that in the name of God. And there's something evil about that. I can say all that, and I can say they're the oppressors and I'm the victim. However, I had to ask myself, like, what attracted me to a church like that in the first place? And to a denomination like that in the first place? How did I not see what was really going on behind the curtains? How did I not see that this system of book of church order that they have set up is harmful to the marginalized and protecting power in a very unhealthy way? And so that's the work in this book too.
Thank you for sharing that. That was super powerful, really impactful. I mean, I'm just like, I want to go punch something after you saying that, and I'm trying to repress my toxic masculinity a little bit, but pray for me.
Yeah.
Like I really think more stories like yours need to be told, because you read books, like Beth Barr and others, and they write these stories, and you're just like, what the heck is going on here? And like Josh and I just finished talking to David Gushee not too long ago, and we were kind of just talking about all the craziness and politics and whatnot today, and I had said something to him. I was like, I feel like Christianity doesn't have to be this hard. And because we were talking about one way that the Bible was being used to drive home a point, and I'm the political host of the show, so like Josh is all into theology, religion, like I read the Robert's Rule of Order book for fun. So
Oh
I'm
man.
just not, I'm not the theology guy. So like, I would be the bad guy to make a theological argument for or against, women pastors or LGBTQ or whatever. I'm just like, let's just treat people like nice, like, and if women want to be pastors, they can be pastors. Because we interviewed a woman pastor, and to hear her story about when she meets with congregants, especially congregants that are men, that they all request to not meet in her office, like they have to meet in a public place. And she's like, I do it because this is what I feel called to do, but these are the things that are different than when men, are in places of power and whatnot. So,
Right.
I'd love for you to just maybe talk about what was sort of like the chef's kiss, if you will, that led you to kind of start on this journey, when you're just, you're reading all the stuff, you're getting kind of pumped up, you're really excited about the stuff you're learning, and then all of a sudden you reach a roadblock. So like, what was that first kind of roadblock?
You mean when I first began writing, or
when you first started to advocate for women's roles in the church?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I said, at first I was really encouraged, and I never aimed to do this, but in my reading, I loved reading so much, and I was reading a lot of academic works, thinking, man, I mean, this stuff is accessible to everyone now. Like anyone can get these books and read them, and there's so many treasures, and I was finding them so helpful in research. And I ended up, my writing really became like a bridge, I think, to kind of close that gap between academia and the regular person, because I felt really strongly about, I don't think that especially Christian academia exists for them to talk amongst themselves. The whole point is it's supposed to trickle down for us, for everybody else.
Yes.
And so I really tried to make that work more interesting and more relevant, or to not, to show how it is,
Yes.
And instead of using an academic voice, use my voice. And so that put me in a lot of different spaces. I gained a lot of academic friends, and so a lot of them, I think, respected my work and would encourage me. But then there's this wall that you can't go past. And like you're saying with this woman pastor, I wrote Why Can't We Be Friends after, like, this was so many things that happened, but this last straw was I was at a dinner, and I was in Philadelphia, and it was at night. Well, it was light when we got there, but turned night while we were there. My husband's home watching the kids while I'm away for this weekend thing. Some people there at this dinner had their spouses with them and some didn't. And it just so turned out that at the end of the night, there were two doors, a front door and a back door, and everybody's walking out different doors to get to where they parked. I had to park in an alley blocks down the road because there just was no parking anywhere near the restaurant. Everything was taken. And at this point, it's night, it's raining, and I'm starting to think about my safety, right, in the city. And I walk out with two Christian leaders, men, and both of them, one of them offered me his umbrella to take. That was it. Nobody offered me a ride to my car. And I just thought, I'm walking down this alley, this sketchy alley in the rain at night. And my husband would be so mad if he knew these men didn't give me a ride, He knew these men. And to think it's all because of appearances, really. I don't think that they thought we were going to break out into an affair going 2 blocks down the road, Really, it has to do more with appearances. But it's, that whole like men and women can't be friends thing, this whole like we can't be seen alone with a woman anywhere. And to me, it really showed how, okay, all this talk about male benevolent leadership is bullcrap, because you won't even risk your own reputation for the safety of your sister. You're going to protect yourself over her. So don't give me that anymore. You know what I mean? And so like physically, like just being a woman in my body caused all kinds of problems that I was trying to write into. And I was trying to like reason with people. Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, shouldn't Christians be the one who could actually holistically look at a human being without over-sexualizing them?
You'd hope so.
Yeah. And then academically, or I don't know if academically is the right word, but, participating in that way, there was such a level. I thought that they were just fringe in our denomination who thought like women shouldn't even teach Sunday school. Women shouldn't teach, a guy above 13 years old and all this wacky stuff. But I found not only was it much, much more prevalent, but it also was enabled by the system itself. And, those who maybe don't disagree, maybe don't agree, completely enable it anyway. So I became a real threat in speaking into that. And that made me dangerous. And so at first I was really offended by this language that I'm dangerous. It seems ridiculous to me. Pretty happy-go person. And people don't have to agree with what I say. And at that time, I was merely writing about discipleship and spiritual formation. I was not writing cases for women to be pastors or elders or things like that. I was really abiding by our confessions in my church. But I was pointing out that, as disciples, are women to do less than men? What does that look like? And this is what I was really evaluating in my writing. And that's what was making me be called dangerous. And at this point in my life, I've embraced that, that label and, the troublemaker label. Like I so badly wanted people to like me and wanted to, be reasonable and not want the pastor in my church to think, oh my gosh, Aimee's a troublemaker. But I am a troublemaker.
Good trouble.
I'm a troublemaker. So those are a couple examples, but there's many, 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 many more.
I'm sure there are. It makes me think Jesus was also a troublemaker, was he not?
Yeah.
He caused some trouble for the established religious elite and systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fascinating, your title. We've been talking about the context and everything, but this idea of saving face, because obviously it seems like there's a double entendre there, where in the one sense,
triple entendre
and triple entendre, maybe even quadruple. So you're trying to save your reputation, right? You mentioned appearances; they were trying to save face. And yet there's this idea of getting your identity attacked, erased, corrupted, right? Just people smearing a smear campaign on you, and the shock to your identity, and then how Jesus as the face that truly saves.
Yes.
And I would love to hear what you mean by that. I mean, I have all sorts of
Yeah.
ideas, and I know our audience does, but how is unpack for our audience? How is Jesus the face that saves, and how does this compare, contrast is a better word, with
Hmm.
the saving face that we normally see in the
Right.
church world?
Right. Okay, let me think about where to start with this answer because there's so many ways that I could go. And I think I want to start with a novel that I read that I talk about in the beginning of the book that stuck with me I read it in my early 20s, and it was C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces. And I
Mm.
loved this novel. I've been calling it my favorite novel ever since. And it's a retelling of the myth of Cupid and Psyche. And I was so impacted by it. But I thought in my 40s, you know what? I need to go back and read that again. I've been saying this is my favorite novel for like 20 something years now. And I went and reread it, and it all the more affirmed my love for that book and that story. And I think that he really gets to it, what you're asking. And so we have the main character, Orwell, who is Psyche's sister. And throughout the book, she's telling the story, which is fascinating that C.S. Lewis can narrate a book as a woman, as a man, so well. But so Orwell is angry with the gods. And so she is writing this book of complaints against the gods, the whole book long. And, her position in life, she's ugly. She doesn't get to be with the one that she loves. She's treated cruelly as a child, but she does love Psyche, her beautiful sister, and she protects her. And so you hear this whole story, and really, she doesn't understand love at all. And you're starting to see that she is manipulating people with her emotions. And love for her is more about like consuming, right? And she doesn't get it. Well, at the end of her life, she has this vision, and it's the end of the novel. And, there's all kinds of drama that happens in the novel. But she, in this vision, is stripped naked and brought before the gods, the council of the gods. And she is face to face with them, naked, with her book of complaints. And they invite her to read her book of complaints. And she's like, finally, this is the moment that she's been waiting for all of her life. And all of a sudden, her book seems smaller than she remembered it. And she opens it up, and it looks like the writing is kind of scratchy and angry. And she's like, okay, I'm going to read this. And she starts reading it. And as she's reading it and reading it and reading it, she realizes that she's saying the same thing over and over and over as the pages go on. And so she's interrupted by the gods, and they say, are you finished? And she says, yes. And she realizes that her complaint was the answer. And that finally, here she is, naked before the gods. And she says something like, how can we expect the gods to answer us? How can we expect them to face us until we have faces? And so this whole persona that she's built up her whole life of goodness and what she thought goodness was, and being what she thought goodness was, and showing that to others and convincing herself that that's who she is, all fell. And that was all persona. It was a mask that she built over her face. And now she realizes she doesn't have a face as she's before the gods. And so I just found that to be such a powerful illustration of our own lives because, we spend, some psychologists say like the first half of your life building this kind of persona of who you think you're supposed to be, who you want to be, who you think others want you to be. And you start convincing yourself, this is who I am actually. And then something happens in your life, and usually much further along, and it disrupts you. And then you realize the persona, the mask, hopefully, And then you start doing that inner work, really, to get to the things that you've been burying and repressing about who you are. And looking at that more as information, and being able to ask yourself some really hard questions and do some, some, like Young calls it, shadow work. So this book is a lot of that kind of inner examination. I open the chapters with storied memory, where I'm going back to early Aimee and telling these memories, and why do I remember it this way? Why has it stuck with me? Why am I impacted this way? Why did I harm that person? I can't believe, I never looked at that, that I could do something so cruel. Just looking back at these things, memories from my parents' divorce and how that affected me. All that came up again, when I went through this church trauma, because in your body, you start feeling those same things that you felt in other times in your life. And so now was the time. Now was the time to do that kind of work. I share journaling, and some of the journaling is really wrestling and praying to God. And I share like excerpts from that in the book, and I combine that with like biblical teaching. So it's an interesting genre at work there. I was in another interview today where the host told me that in the book I exegete the Bible and I exegete Aimee. And he said, I think that's the work that we all are called to do. And I thought, wow, that was a really neat way of putting it. So you're right. Saving face does lead to Jesus being the saving face. The church is saving face in the idiom, the way that it's used as an idiom. And the church has a major persona problem right now and needs to do its work. And so saving face can also be a verb in a way that we can do that work, and help one another find our faces.
I think that's really beautiful. And I'm curious about sort of like your inner strength. Because like we've spoken to a lot of folks on the show, and not just a show, just in public. I mean, Sarah McCammon wrote a whole book about being an evangelical. She kind of helped unpack what that really means. And between Josh and I, we know plenty of folks that are deconstructing and doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious why continue the fight? Like why do you still believe? I guess is maybe the question. Yeah. And it's reminiscent. Like Kristen Dumais wrote a Substack a couple months ago, I think, called like "Why I Still Believe" or something like that. And I thought it was a really brilliant, like blog. And I think every Bible believing person in today's America should write "Why I Still Believe." And we should take those and put them in a book and send it off to Brazos Press so they can, market it for us. And then sorry, if that's in a Brazos Press book, apologies, Ondervan.
Nah, that's funny.
but I'm curious about like your own personal, belief, convictions. Like why are you even still in this game when it would just be so much easier to just be like, you know what, it's easier to be an atheist or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's harder to be an atheist because God won't let go of me, and that is part of the inner work and the inner struggle. I have found the beauty. And I talk about that in Saving Face as well. And one book that deeply ministered to me through the really traumatic disillusionment was The Song of Songs. And, I would shock people by saying that at first. I wrote a whole book about that called The Hope in Our Scars. Here you have, right in the middle of the Bible, you have this book that is full of allegory, full of metaphor. It's song.
Is it paused for you?
Yeah.
Oh, Aimee, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I can hear you guys.
That's so weird. Yeah, all of a sudden your video froze. The last thing we heard was Song of Psalms.
Okay. Yeah, so people get shocked to hear that the Song of Songs, how in the world is that a book that helped you to get through abuse and trauma? And that's where the beauty is. Here you have in the middle of the Bible, you have this book that is full of allegory, poetry, images, and just emotion, right? And you have this Christ figure in the man and the woman representing all his people. And more than that, she represents the dwelling place of God, the temple. And we see maybe something more about anthropology and the symbolism of our bodies in this book. And it's not through presuppositional statements, it's not through didactic teaching, but here you have the woman's voice is dominant in this book, in scripture, in a patriarchal context, right? And she is bold and immodest. And she comes on the scene saying what she wants. She wants to get in to the inner chambers with her lover. And there are scenes, though, like night scenes, where she can't find her lover. Where is he? She names abuse that happens to her from her brothers and from the gatekeepers. And so I just thought that's, here, some of the things she says, I'm like, oh, you can say that? You can say that to God? And then some of the things that he's saying to her, like, come out from the clefts of the rock. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, because your face is lovely and your voice is sweet. I was hearing the opposite in the church. But here is a figure of the incarnate Christ luring me out from the rock. And I just thought, that's Christ's words to me. They were so healing. There's a line where it's like, getting to the wedding part of the song, and he looks at her, he beholds her, and he says, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no spot in you." That song, I mean, the Song of Songs is so evangelical, but to me, it is also, this is what it's all about. It's not that we're supposed to scare people from hell, save them from hell in that kind of way. We are supposed to show them how God delights in us, in Jesus Christ. And that is what the song does so beautifully. And it even says the ugly parts of what's happening in our life, even with leaders in the church. So things like that, having friends to talk to about that. But God shows me himself. And thankfully, it's way bigger than what I thought before. I think being in that denomination for so long, I was really starting to get convinced that truth was this doctrinal matter, and that we need to be certain of every, precise in our theology. And the more certain and precise we are, the closer we get to God. But then what I found is all these like theological elites in my denomination were so immature, so emotionally immature, so spiritually immature. I mean, they would even say things about me like, "Gird thy loins." Bird's coming to speak here or something. "Gird thy loins?" Who talks like that, There were sermons preached against me. There were blogs about me being the feminist leader of the army, and all this crap. So it was so dehumanizing. And I realized what that view of sanctification, it is dehumanizing. It's like that whole brain on a stick thing. And so I'm learning that I was looking at the outside of things, and that we really have to be made ready for reality. We need to be ready for truth. And I think that's what this lifetime is really about, is preparing us. God is preparing us for the ultimate blessing, to see his face in Christ. And he gives us this lifetime to help one another develop our faces and develop our taste for truth. And you think, that is the blessing. Like the blessing in Numbers is, the Lord bless you, the Lord keep you, the Lord's face shine upon you. What does that mean? That's what we want so bad, right? We come into this world looking for a face. We're looking for a face delighting in our face, so that we know that we're loved, that we matter. We start to learn who we are through the faces of others. But ultimately, we come into this world looking for God's face beholding our face and delighting in our face. and saying, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no spot in you." And he could say that because of the work of Jesus Christ.
I think that's really, really powerful. And it makes me think of my own journey, which is very different than yours. But just thinking about like coming and planting a church and this kind of call I felt to kind of leave some of the things that I was finding a lot of safety in, particularly a denomination I was in. And it was really hard because
Mm,
it's a denomination that I still am connected to in many ways. And I love so many of the people
mhm.
and didn't have like, it wasn't like, oh, they're not good, I'm leaving. That's not, it was just kind of my theology had shifted and I had to be
Right.
honest about it. Um, and I just remember going through this process like in the last 5 years where it is, every single insecurity I've had has surfaced in this tension and the feeling of existential threat and the feeling of I'm going to be a failure. This isn't going to work, and this is just going to and and how much your fear takes over and how much you don't see things correctly. You start seeing them in distorted ways, and you start seeing people in distorted ways, and you have to really like work hard
Mm,
to even get to a place where you're. I mean, it's very uh it starts to make you feel like you're not like disorienting is the word that I'm looking for. It's very disorienting. And then
yeah.
trying to find myself back in a place where of orientation towards God.
Hmm.
And it's like it just hit me really hard when you're like, yeah, I still believe because God it would be much harder to be an atheist. Like God would he just won't let go of me. And I feel the exact same way. It was interesting. We had a guy on, Jonathan Rausch, who is, he knew Tim Keller. He knew, I think he was following some of the other, Russell Moore, some of the other guys, even that we've talked to here on the program. And he's an atheist, Jewish gay atheist. That's what he said.
Hmm.
And he was like, yeah, I used to think that Christians were like just unintelligent and uneducated. And he's like, but I don't think that at all. He's like, they just somehow were able to make a connection with the spiritual that I couldn't make.
Hmm.
That I would, and I just when he said that, I was so impressed by the genuineness and the authenticity of that statement because I feel very much the same way. I just feel like I don't know why I have this connection to God. I really truly don't. I would love to say that everyone can have the connection with God. That's what I believe. That's what I've tried to do, but I don't know why I do and my neighbor doesn't,
Yeah. It's a
quote unquote,
mystery.
right? I don't know. I
Hmm.
don't know. And it's like those moments where we put up a mirror to ourselves, everything's difficult. And that's one of the metaphors you use is this
Yes.
imagery
There.
of a
Yeah.
mirror. And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit. Like, how does the imagery and the metaphor of a mirror help us see ourselves accurately and help us in this process
Hmm.
of our spiritual journey and recovering our identity in Christ?
Yeah. So we actually, scientists have found that neurobiologists have found that we have something they call mirror neurons. And so there are neurons working in me. Like if we were to meet for coffee and you were to come in, the body language and the expressions on your face, right away, I'm going to start reading. My right brain is able to, like, this kind of goes along with it, but my right brain is already finding out before the words come out of your mouth whether or not you're happy to see me. And so we have these mirror neurons, and they say, we need this to survive in a culture. But like, you have your hand on your mouth right now. That might make me want to put my hand on my mouth. Or, when Will took a drink, I had a strong urge to take a drink. Like I was thirsty all of a sudden. Those are mirror neurons. And, we know the whole yawn phenomenon as well, right? Mirror neurons. And so it's like the very thing that might annoy us sometimes, like being copied, is actually what is built into us to do so that we can connect with one another. And I can see how we need that for culture to build and to thrive. And so I use that and take it to the whole idea of faces being a mirror. And so I'm going to learn so much about myself from you and the way that you see me, the way that you interact with me. And interestingly, some theologians, like St. Clara of Assisi, is that how you say it? I can't remember now. She talks about Jesus Christ being an eternal mirror, which is so interesting because it's an encounter. And when Jesus encounters people, and as it's recorded in the New Testament, it is like he is holding up a mirror and they finally see who they are. And that's how it's going to be too. I think on that day when we behold him, we're going to see ourselves through the eyes of Jesus Christ. And that is so amazing. So I think that part of our vocation as Christians is to help one another to see who they are through the eyes of Jesus Christ, through my eyes. Because Jesus and me will see Will in a different way than through you, Josh. And so in that way, like if the three of us were friends, you get to learn a different part of Will just through my interactions with him and my seeing of him than you would if I wasn't his friend. That's so fascinating to me. So there's a lot of elements, and I, work with scripture some too, where the mirror metaphor is used in some really powerful ways. But I think we're all wanting that, we kind of know we're looking into the mirror all the time and saying like, who am I? How do you see me? Because I can't see my own face. And even when I look in a mirror, it's like one-dimensional, two-dimensional, right? Like I can't see the side of it and behind it and around it. I can't see the curve in my own nose, but you can.
I want to address something kind of disturbing that you said just a little while ago. You said the three of us were not friends, and I want to dig into that a little bit. I know we just met, but I mean it just seems really harsh, Like I want to be friends with you.
Yeah, what I meant. Like I definitely feel friendly with you guys after having met you. But in a continuing friendship, like Josh would learn, a lot more about you through his friendship with me too. If the three of us were in a continuing friendship.
I gotcha.
And then someone even said that, I forget who it was now, but it was about like the death of somebody. I think it was C.S. Lewis. I'm pretty sure it was C.S. Lewis. That he will not get to know his friend through that other friend anymore. Like it reduces other people too, to lose that one friendship.
Yeah. Kind of in your journeys and your fight, what have you found, makes the biggest difference, or strategies or techniques? Meaning, you're out there, you're telling your story, other women are getting inspired by it. It's all towards, I don't know, maybe it's all towards a greater effort of, hey, like, let's just treat women how they were treated in the Bible. And hey, it's actually pretty good. Like women were actually like viewed as, leaders in their community and whatnot. And why is it that there's a disconnect with the church? So like kind of in this effort that you're pursuing, like what have you found has been, helpful for you to, either one, keep going, or two, get your message across? Because I'm sure that there's probably a woman listening to this now saying, everything Aimee says resonates with me, but I feel like I'm just on a hamster wheel and my gears are just turning and nothing's really changing.
Well, there's lots of things. One is some really great friendships, where we can just be raw and real about things and not pretend, not pretend that everything's okay. And, I have some friendships where we even do that while we hike, and even happy hour hike, which is fabulous and therapeutic. And it's almost like a ritual because I feel like, you walk down, you're in this beautiful view, and we're sharing our life stories and our unmet longings and, all the things. And then we walk back down the mountain, and it's like you leave it there, on the mountain. And we hold each other's stories, though. And so I think being able to share your story, having people that will hold it with you, the story transforms in that way because they weave together, is super important. I've become a lot less rigid in my faith, and I'm so thankful for that. Through this process of disillusionment, God is much bigger, and I don't need to be certain. And that was a faux security, and I need to address those issues about myself. And to be humbled so publicly is horrible, and should never have happened like that. But it's also given me some different freedoms to just say it just doesn't matter that this stuff that they're talking about is so stupid, and so that we're still in a church, I'm not sure we found the church yet, but I think it's important. Sometimes I don't want to go, and you know what? I don't beat myself up. I think sometimes you need to step away, and God's okay, because I'm not injuring him in doing that, so I've just lightened up in those ways, but I still have really hard times. Journaling has been extremely important to me through this and extremely helpful. Having friends that can imagine for me when I can't for myself, like when you're saying when you want to give up, when you don't, how do you hold on to your faith? Sometimes it's the faith of my friends that can imagine for me and remind me. So there's lots of things like that, but I don't want to say it like, now I've arrived, because there's still a lot going on, a lot going on. I end the book with kind of like a big fat, I don't know, in some areas. And I think that that's healthy and mature. And it's a new posture that I find neat, because God can show up there and surprise me. And that's another reason why I haven't walked away from the faith. It's because I want those things that he has to offer so much.
I mean, there's just several statements that you've made in this conversation that have been really striking to me. I mentioned one in my previous question, and what you just talked about with like not being less rigid about your faith, the freedom that's come with that, and even to the point where I'm assuming it would have used to be a kind of a guilty feeling if you missed church or something like that, or there'd be like a really intense sense of like you're a sinful person or you're not doing the right thing or whatever it may be, and I totally understand that, and I totally feel that in my own life, and this rigidity that you are letting go of is really good, I think, overall. And I wonder, I guess my challenge when I'm thinking about it, this is the challenge I've been facing, because I feel the same way of being less rigid. And like, almost like, well, it's like, I can't save this person. I mean,
Right.
I don't know what's going to save that person. I can't do it.
It's not up to
And
you.
yet, it's not up to me. And yet I guess the question that I'm having is like, what is up to me? Like, what is my role? Like when you're looking and you've written this book, it's powerful testimony, right? You're looking at the problems with the church right now, our persona issue. We have to do some work. You mentioned that, like, there's a lot of issues that the church is facing right now. And it always has, but this is our moment, right? So we have to face what we're facing.
Right.
And so it's like, what is our job? What is our role with even bringing this faith to people and being a representative to people? And because I will find myself being like, am I just too, not too gracious, but it's like, am I just too like, is it that I'm not willing to challenge? Is it that I'm not willing to be embarrassed, or I'm not willing to have uncomfortable conversations? Is that what's real? Am I hiding behind a graciousness or a lack of rigidity? And again, that's my question. I'm
Yeah.
not saying
And
that's your question.
I ask those
I
questions too.
Yeah, so I'd just love to get your response. I know we're coming to the end of our conversation. I'd love to get your response on that. And
Sure.
then, yeah, we'll just have a couple more short questions.
Yeah, so I think that's the work that every person needs to do. One of the questions I ask in the book is, what story do you tell yourself about who God is and what he wants from you? And we're telling ourselves this story, but we don't even realize it. And so you're asking really good questions. And I think we all need to do that. And I don't think that we will come to the answer to that question and then, we'll be given a test. And then we'll see how, I don't think it goes like that. I think this is something that we just keep struggling with over and over. And then we get these discoveries that are fabulous, but we also get this, oh, like, I have some unlearning to do, and, and that's repentance, right? That's repentance. And so I've embraced unlearning, which before I just wanted to be so sure. So these are, I think, this is the work that church should be nurturing for us to do. But I think in most churches, it's not a safe place to do that. But I think we have to do this work on ourselves. If we don't do this work on ourselves, what good are we to anyone else? Because all the stuff we're stuffing down is coming out. We just don't see it, and it's coming out and it's harming other people and ourselves. So I think that, we're called to do this work on ourselves so that we can grow in our understanding of who God is. And the more, like, in our relationships that we can help in that way, like, can I draw more of Josh out of Josh,
Yeah.
And I think that's what our job, part of our vocation is as friends, face to face before one another, is that there is an encounter there. And that encounter is to awaken the other person, and I think that there's a blessing there. There's a blessing of God awakening me in this encounter to bless you because he exists, And so I don't know, I really feel a strong sense too, and just like loving your people, and that will help you in that area. But I don't have one concrete answer. I have a whole convoluted book that I wrote.
Hey, that's
of me
good
doing
enough.
that work.
Way more than good enough. That's really good. What kind of stories would you want to hear, and maybe even in some of your the pre-reading that people have done? What kind of stories do you want to hear that would let you know, hey, this book,
Oh
this
man.
work is accomplishing what I set it out to do?
I mean, I love to hear personally how it affects people, and I really am hearing, like, from the pre-readers, just how the stories, the memories and the stories that I tell really provoked them to do that
Hmm.
for themselves too. Like, it provoked a memory of their own, or something like that. But what I would really love to hear is people reading this book together and meeting, like, in a group, because I feel like that's where it would be its most powerful, is if you can start having a container in your friendships where you can do that, and where you can share your stories more, where maybe you will come with a memory this week and, wonder why I wanted to write this one down. Like, we don't think that our stories are that interesting, but they're fascinating. They're fascinating. Like,
Yes.
who would have thought that me sitting on a sit and spin would have any interest to it? But, like, in the last podcast I was interviewed in today, like, we had a whole 15 minutes out of that because he was so fascinated by what that memory did, ignited in him. And I just thought, that is so cool, like, I love that. And he helped me understand myself more, so it's his understanding and reaction from my memory, So to be able to do those kind of things, I've had some opportunities to do that kind of in a group, and that's just powerful stuff, man. So I would love to hear people say that they're doing that, and then to hear about, like, what comes out of it.
That's so cool. How can people, is there a particular place you want them to get the book? I know it comes out on April 9th, which is when we're
Comes out in
planning
April 8th.
to
It's a
April
Tuesday.
8th.
Okay.
It's a Tuesday. And so we're going to plan to post right around there.
Okay.
But where would you like people to get it?
Anywhere they
And
want. It's available all
anywhere.
over the place. It's, on Amazon and all the major, book outlets. Savingfacebook.com is a landing place for my book. I also have aimeebyrd.com where you can just kind of see what I'm doing on Substack and interviews and other things like that. And I also narrate the audiobook. So,
Awesome.
that is something else to throw out there.
That is great. And so what do you have? What else do you have that you're working on? What's next?
Writing this book has made me want to go back to school. So I am taking some counseling
great.
courses right now, which has been awesome. I'm loving it. And I actually have class in 2 hours with a major presentation
Nice.
due. But yeah, so I'm doing that right now. And I'm still writing on my Substack. And I don't know what's next. I have some ideas percolating in my head, but I'm trying to figure out where to concentrate my time.
Well, that is awesome. And whatever is next, we'll have to have you on again to talk about your next project. We would really love that.
Well, that would be great. Thanks so much for having me on today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, same here, Aimee. It was so great. And to our friends who have joined us, guys, thank you so much for jumping on the program today and spending some time with us. This has been Aimee Byrd. Make sure that you check out her book. We're going to be putting links to the website and getting the book.
Cover?
Yes, there it is. I love that cover. And we just really appreciate you guys jumping in and joining us. Make sure you share this with someone that you feel like will benefit from this conversation and needs to read this book. And until next time, guys, keep your conversations not right or left, but up. God bless.
I like that.
Yeah.
You
Are
got it,
you
Will.
stop? Oh, I'm sorry.